Greetings, everyone. So thank you for joining me here. We're going to be doing a live reading of United Church of America. This is part 1 of 3. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I will read first a portion of the blessing that comes at the beginning of the book, and then probably the majority of the chapter on honesty. And going through that, if you have any questions, type them in on the comments, and we'll discuss those at the end of the reading below, and I'll try to give you a little bit more insight as to maybe what I was thinking and my thoughts in writing that. And then, of course, if you have any preferences on what we'll do for the final writing or the next reading, we could do that if you have any questions. But I do already have a passage picked out that we'll read. So we're just going to go through the very first part here. I'll read this live. And if you've read the book, you've probably read through this before, but I'd like to start here with the blessing. And this is something that I had written in my journal probably years ago before I started writing this book, and I felt it was appropriate to put at the beginning here. So as you're listening in or reading the book on your own, just remember this here, something that God said, as it's quoted. He says, "I will go with you. You will face many challenges. Do not face them on your own, or else you will fail. You must seek me," that's God, "above all else. I will show you the way. You will be tested. You will work hard. I will be glorified. I have given you a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. Have courage. In me, the true vine, you are able to do all things." And that's just something that God had spoken to me in my spirit as I'm writing this. Sometimes as I journal, I'll just write what I hear him telling me, and I'm sure many of you may be journaling as well. So that way, it was really just an encouragement to you, the reader, to hear what is something that God might be speaking to you, encourage you to listen and to hear his voice. So we're going to go ahead, fast forward to the honesty chapter, which is, let's see, this is the second chapter in part 3. Honesty is the first H in higher. That's honesty, integrity, godliness, health, education, results. And this chapter really details more specifically my personal journey. You can say it's kind of like a testimony of sorts, but I will read through this chapter, and it's not entirely too long, but we'll go for maybe 15 minutes at most, or less, depending on how fast I read. It's about 6 pages or so, not even. Yeah, about 6 maybe. So, so chapter 5 on honesty is defined as: honesty is behavior in action and words that aims to convey truth. This quality is an essential aspect of God's own nature and purposes, and is required of those whom he calls to be his people. Righteous lips are the delight of a king, and he loves him who speaks what is right. That's Proverbs 16:13. Be honest with God, yourself, your wife, or your girlfriend, husband, or boyfriend, children, friends, neighbors, strangers, and with all people, and in all things. For we aim at what is honorable, not only in the Lord's sight, but also in the sight of man. And basically, I'm just sharing that it's going to be hard to share honesty because it requires you to look in the mirror, which makes you vulnerable. And as Jack Nicholson once said in A Few Good Men, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth. And again, excuse me if I interject here and there as we go, but I'll try to read straight through as much as I can without, my own little comments. If you have questions, go ahead and type those as we go. It's about being transparent and revealing your true self. That's honesty, right? It's not the social media anonymous self that you want everyone to think that you are, okay? It takes real strength to have the courage to put down your defenses and come out from behind your walls, whether those walls are fear, isolation, or even a keyboard, okay? This is why Jesus is needed to go forward in honesty. Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Even I had lied to myself for so long, and so much that I didn't know who I truly was. And when you are honest and convey the truth, you will be set free from the barriers that you put up, the veils and walls of rejection, and you'll be able to find the joy of the Lord in the process. It is like coming out from death into abundant life. The journey as we know it can and will be difficult, but we must believe that we will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. What better way to get honest with yourself and discover who you are than to truly discover and honestly know who God is? He made you and knew you before you were born. He is the only one who truly knows who you are, and you must seek Him first to find it. Honor is honesty in action. It is something you do and is revealed through your behavior, and is something others see. Over time, your honorable behavior will stack up, and you will develop a reputation of honesty. Socrates once said, "Know thyself." Probably something we've probably all heard. So knowing yourself is important. Being honest is one of the hardest things you can do, while at the same time one of the most liberating. It helps to create self-awareness and help to develop self-knowledge. In doing so, you can clearly recognize the weaknesses and strengths within yourself, and therefore be guided by the truth, capital truth, Jesus, to reveal your purpose in life. That's what honesty will do for you. With it, you no longer must hide behind the lie of rejection that results from fear. And again, if you're not operating in who you truly are, it becomes difficult. Like a lot of times you'll find a vast majority of people are unhappy with their work for whatever reasons, but one big reason could be because they're not really truly doing maybe what God has gifted them to do. That's not everybody, but maybe that's a lot of people. And maybe a lot of people are doing what they like to do, but they don't know God, okay? He still will give those gifts regardless of whether you're saved, right? And so with it, you no longer must hide behind the lie of rejection that results from fear. And the first time that I became truly honest with myself was in September 2009, specifically September 21st, 2009. It was when I first prayed to God, asking Him to save me and bring me into His family for eternity. And growing up, I went to a Catholic church, and it was something that I did, but never really got into. I wasn't really a part of it. I knew of God, but I didn't know God. I was never really encouraged or taught to read the Bible deeply, or that it was possible to know God on a personal level as a friend. And that's just from my own experiences. It's never something that I chased after, as a kid and growing up. So as I grew up and moved on to college, I stopped going to church. And in 5 years throughout my time at college, I went to church 4 times. 4 times, okay? It just wasn't that important in my life. There was no roots. There was no grounding, really. But somewhere along the line, I always thought that I would get back to it. I remember telling myself one day I'll start going when I have a family, but first, I must go to reconciliation and then communion every week, striving to maintain perfection. I just felt like it was a bunch of rules to follow that didn't have any real impact on my life. And so I went through life trying to do everything on my own, which I did. School, work, friends, life. In 5 years at Pitt, I didn't make any new friends, 0. Okay, aside from a couple people that I knew when I grew up in Pittsburgh, and we moved away and came back, kind of reconnected with 2 old friends. I didn't think that I needed anybody for the most part, so I didn't bother. But really, the truth was, I didn't think that people wanted me around. I wasn't confident in myself, and that was based on a fear of being rejected. Okay, nobody would accept me. That's what I learned from experiences of being bullied growing up. It created a lack of confidence in how I felt about myself, how I looked, talked, walked, and even what I thought was possible for me. Feeling shame for oneself is not something that you want to allow to control your life. I was picked on in elementary school many times, and even so much that my brother had it even worse than me, and I wasn't even confident enough to come to his defense. And then we moved away from the friends that I did have, when I was, in middle school, in North Carolina. So we went from Pittsburgh in elementary school to North Carolina middle school. And so when I was starting fresh in high school, again, I went to North Carolina from about 6th grade through 11th grade. Basically I simply stuck to myself. Okay. This carried on in college. And you can see how, I didn't start any new friendships with people. Okay, I just reconnected with those two friends that I had mentioned from before, as we moved to North Carolina several years ago. So of course, you probably already caught on. Yes, I'm from Pittsburgh. Not to say that those friends weren't enough. Okay, anybody can have just one or two friends, and that's probably even enough. Okay, if they're good friends, they're true friends. But there was something deeper, a deep-seated stronghold of fear and rejection, not being accepted. Okay, the fear of rejection put me on a path that only God knew. In hindsight, though, I can say that He was hiding me and protecting me. With that knowledge, I encourage you to not regret or reject your past, because all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to His purposes. I thought I was destined to be a loner. I wanted to get my life right before I got my life right, so to speak. Much like many people want to get a little in shape or lose a few pounds before coming to the gym or hiring a coach. Maybe it was just human pride or my own stubbornness. What was I waiting for? God had different plans, though. Before my final semester at Pitt, I had to complete an internship. I did this at the YMCA in Olean, New York. While there to learn my craft as a personal trainer, I started coaching in a program called Big Brother. I would write out the workouts for members to complete, and they would fill in their reps and weights and turn it in. I would mark their progressions for them, and we would meet for a weekly session to make sure they stayed track with the program. And over the course of my time there, I met many people, but one person stood out and we developed a friendship. Hey, what do you know? I'd found a friend. God is faithful to show Himself in many ways. So by August, my internship had come to an end. And by the way, this is all before I was saved. Okay. And I had to go back to finish my last semester at Pitt. Okay. So 2009. Over the summer, my new friend and I kept in touch via email. And one day she told me about Jesus. This is after I had answered her question, if you could speak to anybody in history, who would it be? I said Jesus. Aside from other figures like professional athletes or anybody else famous. The scripture that she then shared with me was, and this was the first time I ever read the verse, John 14:6. It said, there is no way to the Father except through me. And Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I had that backwards there, but I am the way, the truth, and the life. And the next day I knelt down alone in my aunt's kitchen, 5328 and a half Dresden Way, whom I was staying with at the time, and invited Jesus into my heart, asking to be saved, and I was. This is the way. And by the way, that house, it was a row house, the houses that are connected. That one is burned down, no longer there. Okay, just that one. Okay. The very next thing that I did was go to reconciliation in the church across the street from that house. It's funny though, because I thought I had to speak to a man about my sin right after I told God all about it. Okay, kind of how we humans start something new. Our old behaviors or ideas can kind of creep back in. We don't really know what to do. That's kind of why maybe a lot of people will come to church on Easter. They think that's where they're going to find God. Because that's where they know that, okay, that's where you go, if you want to experience God. That's not to say you can't find God in church. You certainly can, but people should understand and know that you can find Him anywhere, in any moment, okay? He will meet you where you're at. He's literally knocking on the door of your heart, okay? So aside from that, needless to say, everything from that moving forward was going to be different. It was then that I finally realized I was truly a part of something bigger than myself. It was then that I finally had a friend that was always there, always listened, a friend who began to reverse the lies I told myself. These deeply held beliefs that had damaged my confidence. It was time to get it back. Sarah, the friend who had told me about Jesus and led me to salvation, recommended that I get a study Bible. I had never had a Bible of my own that I used. Being a college student at the time, I went to a half-price bookstore out on McKnight Road in Pittsburgh. There I found a Bible, and the first page I opened to was John 14:6. Coincidence? Certainly not. This is the truth. His word is truth, and the truth shall set you free. So after purchasing it, I saw that it was only a New Testament version, none of the old stuff. But in a way, God was getting rid of the old stuff in my life anyway. Now, I'm not saying the Old Testament is not good. You certainly want both halves to have full revelation of who God is and who Jesus is. So as I began to grow in Christ during my final semester at Pitt, I was throwing off the old things, selling away the video games I spent hours per day with. I had hidden within those games to escape rejection and be accepted in the avatars I created. I became less interested in other hobbies, such as following professional sports. And my focus was simply on God. It was simply God calling me to Him, laying off the old and reaching towards the new. It was removing some things to make space and time for He and me. Then one day I learned the true value of a friend. I was working at Wendy's, my job, for about 7 years, since high school through college, on a 12-hour shift on Saturday. And lo and behold, who shows up from over 5 hours away from Olean, New York, but Sarah, my friend who led me to Christ. She was with her friend and paid me a surprise visit, searching several Wendy's. Now, this is an interesting story. I'll share briefly what's obviously written, but if you ever wanted to hear the full story, just message me. So she was with her friend, paid me a visit, searching several Wendy's in Pittsburgh until they found me by intuition, because she had recalled that I lived near a venue called Mr. Small's, where Snoop Dogg once performed, believe it or not. She asked where that was at and found the nearest Wendy's, which is where I was. She just came to say hi and share her progress with lifting weights and becoming stronger and healthier. So to me, that was everything, because nobody had ever gone out of their way to do something like that for me. It was brief, but impactful. She had left me a soul care Bible, and this was a complete version, the Old and New Testament. That gift was special because I was like a sheep without a flock. I still didn't go to church at this point. And again, it's funny to consider myself as a sheep when I always thought of myself as a lone wolf. It wasn't until I moved back to Olean after graduation from Pitt and started in my field at the YMCA as a personal trainer that I began to explore the possibility of a church, a community, a family. Not being familiar with the area, I asked a coworker at the Y, and she suggested a place called Obi. I instantly thought, Obi-Wan Kenobi, these are not the droids you're looking for, if you remember that. But it was Obi Community Church. That was the church they had mentioned. So I ventured there next Sunday. I was a little unsure of what to expect coming from a Catholic background, and seeing a rock band set up at the front of the church was a little different. So I eked my way about halfway up, to the middle pews. And the cool thing was that at the beginning of each sermon, they asked if there was anyone new. I raised my hand. They brought me a little gift pack with some information, which I thought was great. What was even cooler, though, was that the pastor's sermon had included the verse John 14:6, which is another friendly confirmation that I was now a part of the life. So as you can see, the church, the body of Christ, something bigger than myself, is life, a living body where each part adds to the whole. And so the thing was, at each point along the way, the first verse that led me to salvation was John 14:6, the way, the truth, and the life. The first thing that happened was I followed Christ as the way. Second, I received His truth, the Word, His truth, and then I joined part of the life. He is the body. He heads the body of Christ, right? So that's that little revelation that He gave me, which I didn't realize this until 2 years after the first time I gave my testimony. And so after the service, I met another friend who invited me to lunch. Well, someone who introduced himself. Wasn't a friend yet, but again, as a fellow Christian, you have that instant connection, who invited me to lunch. And everyone, I realized, was so welcoming, and it was the first time in my life that I ever truly felt that I was accepted and not rejected. And honestly, that is because I had let down my walls. There were no walls. God gave me that grace. And I was in a place where I felt that people genuinely cared about me. It was a missing piece, or rather, I was a missing piece. And I think we all are until we function in our purpose within the body. And God gave that to me, something greater than myself that I could be a part of. And so I think I'll kind of stop there. There's a couple other pages to that chapter, but that gives a brief synopsis of my testimony. And essentially, the idea is that I shared that because it's me being honest about how I came to know Jesus, and without that, I would not obviously have written this book here. So that's from the chapter, I believe it was 5, on honesty, and we really have to start with that. Whenever you're seeking God, you have to be honest with yourself. You can't hide yourself or any part of yourself from God. It's like playing hide and seek in a glass house, because he can see you everywhere you go. There's nowhere you can go that you can hide from him, that he doesn't know where you are. He doesn't know what you're thinking. He doesn't know what you think you're hiding. You can hide things from other people, and maybe you can get away with hiding those things, but you can't hide anything from God. And that's why I say it's easy to come to him, because he knows it all. He knows everything about you. He knows even what you're going to say before you say it, because he exists outside of time. He can see all that. So just be honest with him, share everything with him, but also take time to listen. It's not something that has to happen only at church on Sundays and Wednesdays, or even in just a small group. It doesn't have to happen. You don't have to be on your knees for 2 hours every morning and every night. Although, I mean, if God leads you to spend time like that, that's fine. But I just want you to recognize that you can be honest with him every moment throughout the day. Just say his name, seek his name, tell him that you trust him, tell him that you love him, and he is there for you. So I just want to give everyone that little reminder about honesty. Be honest with yourself. It is really a good first step to lead you into seeking God, and he'll raise you up from one level to next. Okay.